For years, the internet treated the rumors like a game. A whisper here, a blurred photograph there, a sudden disappearance from public view followed by carefully edited smiles that convinced no one. Audiences watched from behind glowing screens, dissecting every silence, every nervous glance, every sentence Tia Weston never finished. Fame had transformed her life into a puzzle people believed they owned. But rumors are strange things. Sometimes they fade quietly into irrelevance. And sometimes they wait in the dark, growing heavier inside the person forced to carry them. Behind the headlines, Tia Weston had spent years learning how to survive inside a version of herself the public demanded. The cameras loved certainty. Social media loved perfection. But perfection had become exhausting. Every interview felt rehearsed. Every appearance felt like performance instead of existence. And then, one night, something changed. No dramatic music. No carefully prepared statement. No glamorous reveal. Just a woman sitting beneath cold studio lights, staring into silence a second too long before finally speaking the words the world had been waiting to hear. The moment lasted less than a minute. But for Tia Weston, it would divide her life into before and after forever. The rumors did not begin loudly. They arrived the way storms sometimes gather beyond distant mountains, subtle enough to ignore at first, dangerous enough to change everything later. At the beginning, it was only comments online. Strangers noticing small details during interviews. Fans replaying clips frame by frame, studying nervous smiles and unfinished answers like detectives searching for hidden evidence. Entire communities formed around theories about Tia Weston's private life. Millions of people who had never met her suddenly believed they understood her better than she understood herself. And the internet never sleeps. Inside hotel rooms glowing blue from endless phone screens, Tia watched strangers dismantle her identity piece by piece. Some defended her passionately. Others mocked her with casual cruelty that felt almost effortless. Every photograph became evidence. Every silence became suspicious. The terrifying part was not the rumors themselves. It was how quickly they stopped feeling separate from reality. By 28, Tia had mastered the performance of calm. Publicists admired her discipline. Interviewers described her as composed and elegant. Fans called her mysterious. But mystery was simply fear wearing expensive clothes. At award shows, flashes from cameras exploded like lightning against her skin. Questions arrived disguised as compliments. You seem different lately. You've been very private. Anything you'd like to tell your fans? Each sentence carried invisible weight beneath it. And every time, Tia smiled. Not because she wanted to. Because survival had trained her to. One rainy evening in London, after another carefully controlled appearance, Tia sat alone inside the back of a black SUV, while city lights smeared across the windows like watercolor paintings dissolving in darkness. Her phone vibrated constantly beside her. Notifications flooded the screen faster than she could process them. A new interview clip had gone viral. In the clip, she hesitated for less than 2 seconds before answering a question. 2 seconds. That was all the internet needed. Millions of strangers immediately transformed hesitation into confession. She closed the phone. But silence could not protect her anymore. Inside her apartment later that night, the quiet became unbearable. Expensive furniture surrounded her like objects displayed inside a museum nobody actually lived in. Fame had given her beautiful rooms, but removed the ability to feel safe inside them. For years, she had convinced herself she could outrun speculation by staying controlled, careful, unreadable. Instead, the secrecy only made the world hungrier. At 3 a.m, unable to sleep, Tia stood beside the kitchen counter staring at her reflection in the dark window. The city glowed behind her like another universe entirely. She barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because the rumors were true, not because they were false, but because somewhere along the way, she had stopped knowing where performance ended and reality began. Then her phone vibrated again. One message. No name attached. Just 7 words. We need to talk before they find out. Tia's breathing slowed instantly, because she recognized exactly who sent it. And suddenly, for the first time in years, the rumors no longer felt distant. They felt close enough to destroy her life completely. Long before magazine covers and flashing cameras transformed her into a public obsession, Tia Weston understood something most children never should. Love could disappear without warning. The house she grew up in was never loud enough to look broken from the outside. There were no shattered windows, no dramatic confrontations spilling into the streets. Instead, silence lived there permanently, stretching through hallways and dinner tables like invisible smoke. Her parents mastered the art of emotional distance while pretending everything was normal. Appearances mattered. Truth did not. Her mother smiled beautifully in public. Her father spoke carefully around guests. Friends described the family as elegant, successful, composed. But inside the home, conversations rarely lasted long enough to become honest. Feelings were treated like dangerous things, something to hide quickly before they embarrassed everyone involved. As a child, Tia learned how to study people instead of trusting them. She memorized facial expressions, changes in tone, tiny shifts in body language. She became skilled at predicting disappointment before it arrived. Survival, she discovered early, depended on becoming whatever others needed her to be. At school, she transformed completely. Teachers loved her discipline. Other students admired her confidence. On stage during small theater performances, she discovered a strange kind of freedom inside pretending to be someone else. Characters felt easier than reality. Scripts felt safer than conversations. Applause felt almost identical to affection. And for the first time in her life, attention made the loneliness quieter. By 16, local talent agencies had already started noticing her. She carried herself with unusual emotional intensity for someone so young. Directors praised her ability to communicate sadness without speaking. Cameras seemed drawn toward her naturally, as if they recognized the hidden fractures beneath her calm expression. But success created new fears alongside excitement, because performance was no longer limited to stages. Soon, Tia began performing constantly. At home, at school, in interviews, even alone. There were moments late at night when she sat awake wondering why she always felt slightly disconnected from herself, like someone living beside her own life instead of inside it. Certain emotions terrified her for reasons she could not explain. Certain thoughts arrived suddenly and vanished just as fast, leaving guilt behind them like fingerprints. She buried all of it beneath ambition. Ambition was easier to control. During her final year before international success arrived, Tia attended an industry celebration after landing a major television role that would eventually change her entire future. The event glittered with artificial luxury. Crystal glasses reflected golden light across crowded rooms filled with executives pretending to care about art. Everyone congratulated her. Everyone said she was destined for greatness. But sometime after midnight, while searching for a quiet place away from the noise, Tia accidentally overheard two producers speaking privately near a balcony entrance. "She's perfect for the audience," one of them said. The other laughed softly. "Only if she keeps certain parts of herself hidden." The sentence lasted seconds, but something inside her froze instantly, because the men speaking had lowered their voices the moment she approached, because one of them looked genuinely nervous after realizing she had heard them, and because deep down, even then, Tia already understood exactly what they meant. That night, she stood alone outside beneath cold city lights while traffic moved endlessly below the balcony like rivers of glowing metal. Wind tangled through her hair as distant music echoed behind her from inside the party. For the first time, success stopped feeling simple. Fame suddenly looked conditional, fragile, transactional, as if the world was offering her love only under the agreement that certain truths remained permanently invisible. And somewhere beneath the excitement of finally becoming somebody important, fear quietly began becoming part of her identity. Fame did not arrive like a moment. It arrived like a system. At first, it felt like elevation, a steady rise from ordinary life into something brighter, faster, almost unreal. Invitations multiplied. Opportunities stacked. Her name began appearing in places she had never imagined seeing it. Billboards, headlines, trending lists that refreshed every second like a heartbeat the world could hear. Tia Weston became a product of attention long before she understood the cost of it. Every detail of her existence was gradually refined. Her voice softened for interviews. Her posture adjusted for cameras. Her smile became a carefully timed response rather than an emotion. Publicists monitored her words the way surgeons monitor vital signs, any inconsistency treated as risk. And slowly, without permission, the world began rewriting her. Not as she was, but as she needed to appear. At first, Tia tried to resist it internally. She remembered who she was before all of it, the quiet observer, the girl who once believed performance was freedom rather than containment. But fame has a way of rewarding compliance. The more controlled she became, the more the world praised her authenticity, a contradiction she never learned how to solve. Interviews turned into rehearsed emotional choreography. Questions were predictable. Answers became safer with repetition. Even laughter began arriving late, as if waiting for approval before existing. Behind the scenes, exhaustion grew invisible but constant. There were nights when she sat in dressing rooms, still wearing makeup designed for strangers, staring at her reflection while people outside praised how effortless she looked. Effortless. That word followed her everywhere like a lie she was expected to maintain. Then the rumors expanded. They stopped being whispers. They became narratives. Entire online threads formed timelines of suspicion, connecting unrelated moments into imagined patterns. A delayed response became secrecy. A private trip became scandal. A neutral expression became evidence of emotional collapse. The more silence she maintained, the louder the world became. Her team urged patience. Her publicist urged control. Her instinct urged escape. But escape from something invisible is never simple. One afternoon during a press tour in New York, Tia sat inside a brightly lit studio, surrounded by cameras designed to make everything feel intimate and honest. The interviewer leaned forward with practiced curiosity, smiling in a way that suggested concern without actual empathy. "You've been the subject of a lot of speculation recently," he said gently. "Is there anything you'd like to clarify?" A pause followed. It lasted only a moment. But inside that moment, something shifted. Tia's mind moved quickly, not toward anger, not toward denial, but toward exhaustion so deep it felt almost physical. She thought of the carefully curated version of herself, the version that answered questions without revealing truth, the version that had been praised for being gracefully private. Her fingers tightened slightly in her lap. The room waited. Lights hummed softly. Cameras stayed still. And then she spoke, measured, controlled, almost too calm. "I think people forget," she said carefully, "that they are watching a version of someone, not the entire person." The answer was safe, perfectly safe. But online, safety never survives interpretation. Within hours, the clip was everywhere, and the silence between her words became louder than the words themselves. People slowed the footage, zoomed in, analyzed her eyes, her pause, the exact moment she looked away. New theories emerged instantly, not about what she said, but about what she did not. That night, alone in a hotel room overlooking a city that never stopped moving, Tia watched herself become a story she could no longer recognize. The television played muted in the background. Her phone lit up again and again. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a person being watched. She felt like a problem being studied. Somewhere in that realization, something fragile inside her began to fracture. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in a way that suggested it had been breaking for a very long time already. And the machine of fame continued spinning. Completely unaware, she was no longer sure how long she could stay inside it. There is a stage in collapse that does not look like collapse at all. It looks like withdrawal. At first, Tia Weston simply became less visible. A scheduled appearance was postponed. Then another. Then a project quietly vanished from public calendars without explanation. Her team issued polished statements about personal time and creative space, phrases designed to sound reassuring while revealing nothing at all. But absence, in her world, was never neutral. It was interpreted. It was filled. It was consumed. Within days, speculation turned aggressive. Headlines stopped asking questions and began building conclusions. Social media filled the gaps with certainty where information did not exist. The narrative no longer needed Tia. It had learned to survive without her. Inside that silence, something far more private was happening. She was no longer resting. She was retreating. Days blurred together inside rooms that felt increasingly unfamiliar despite their luxury. Curtains stayed closed for long stretches of time. Meals were forgotten. Sleep arrived in fragments rather than cycles. The world outside continued functioning normally, but Tia experienced it only through screens, distorted, distant, unreal. Friends reached out. Some received no response. Others received replies that felt rehearsed, like someone else had written them in advance. Trust, once taken for granted, had become difficult to access. Every message carried suspicion. Every knock on the door felt like intrusion. Even kindness began to feel unsafe, as if it might demand something she no longer had the strength to give. And then came the nights. Long, unbroken, unrelenting nights where silence stopped being peaceful and started feeling alive. Thoughts that had been buried under years of performance began resurfacing with uncomfortable clarity. Memories she had avoided returned without warning. Small humiliations, unspoken fears, moments of disconnection she had never allowed herself to fully process. The rumors outside continued growing louder. But inside, she was experiencing something far more personal than rumor. She was losing the ability to distinguish between who she was and who she had been forced to become. By the time her team insisted on one final solution, a televised interview meant to reset public perception, Tia no longer argued. Not because she agreed, but because resistance required energy she no longer had access to. The decision was made quietly. No announcement, no preparation, just a date scheduled into a calendar that no longer felt like hers. On the night before the interview, she stood alone in front of a mirror for a long time without moving. The reflection did not feel unfamiliar exactly. It felt incomplete, like a version of herself paused mid-transition. Somewhere in the distance, the city continued glowing. But inside her, something had already gone quiet, and that silence was beginning to feel irreversible. The studio was colder than expected. Not physically. The temperature was controlled, comfortable, engineered for professionalism. But emotionally, it felt like stepping into a space where truth had no natural place to hide. Cameras were positioned with surgical precision. Lights softened every imperfection. The audience beyond the glass remained invisible, yet fully present in imagination. Millions watching through screens, waiting for something they could interpret. Tia Weston sat in the center of it all, dressed simply, her posture composed out of necessity rather than confidence. This was not an interview anymore. It was a pressure system. The host spoke gently at first, guiding conversation through familiar territory, career highlights, upcoming projects, gratitude for support. Tia responded carefully, as she always had, shaping her answers into something safe enough to survive public digestion. But then the tone shifted. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just slightly. A pause became longer than expected. A smile faded faster than intended. And then the question arrived. The one everyone had been circling for months without saying directly. There's been a lot of speculation, the host said, voice softer now. About your personal life. About what you've chosen not to address. Is there something you want to say to people watching you? The room tightened. Even the silence changed shape. For a moment, Tia did not answer. Not because she was searching for words, but because something inside her was no longer negotiating. Years of control, silence, image management, all of it gathered into a single point of exhaustion, so complete it no longer felt like fear. It felt like release. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. Not rehearsed, not polished, just human. There are things people have believed about me, she said slowly, that I never corrected because I thought silence would protect me. A breath, the kind that carries weight. I didn't realize silence would become its own story. The host did not interrupt. No one did. Tia continued, eyes steady but distant. I have spent a long time trying to be what people expected, trying to stay understandable, manageable, safe for everyone else's version of me. Her fingers tightened slightly in her lap, and I think I forgot what I actually am in the process. The confession did not arrive like drama. It arrived like honesty that had been delayed too long to feel clean. When she finished speaking, the studio remained still for several seconds that felt longer than minutes. Somewhere beyond the cameras, reactions were already forming. Editing decisions were already being made. Clips would be cut, moments repeated, headlines written before she even left the room. But for Tia, something had shifted that could not be edited back. For the first time in years, she had not performed survival. She had simply spoken it. The world reacted before she even left the building. Not metaphorically, literally. Phones lit up across continents at the same moment the interview ended. Notifications multiplied faster than comprehension. Clips spread across platforms, replayed, dissected, reframed within minutes. Every sentence Tia had spoken became a separate conversation. Every pause became interpretation. Every expression became evidence for something else entirely. But inside the studio hallway, none of that noise existed yet. There was only the echo of what had just been said. Tia walked slowly, escorted by staff who avoided eye contact not out of cruelty, but uncertainty. No one was sure what to say to someone who had just undone a carefully constructed public identity in under a minute. Her phone was already vibrating nonstop. She did not look at it. Not immediately. Because something unfamiliar had taken its place. Not peace exactly, but absence of pressure. A strange quiet where performance used to live. The first days after the confession were not dramatic in the way the public expected. There was no immediate disappearance. No grand collapse. Instead, there was recalibration. Some people withdrew from her life quietly, unable to reconcile the version they thought they knew with the version that had spoken openly. Others reached out with unexpected honesty, admitting they had never understood how heavy her silence must have been. The reactions were not uniform. They never are. But what surprised Tia most was not the public response. It was the internal shift. For the first time in years, she did not wake up calculating how she would be perceived before she even left her bed. There was no immediate pressure to curate herself into acceptability. Even the criticism, which was loud and often harsh, carried a strange secondary effect. It no longer defined her movements. Outside attention continued, but it no longer dictated internal reality with the same authority. There were days she stayed inside, not hiding, just existing. There were walks taken without destination, meals eaten without photographing them, conversations that were not optimized for interpretation. Healing, she discovered, was not dramatic. It was repetitive, uneven, unimpressive from the outside. And yet, slowly, something began returning. Not the version of herself the world had created, but something closer to the version she had forgotten before fame ever asked her to become someone else. One evening, months later, Tia stood outside under ordinary streetlight. No cameras, no crowd, no pressure to perform even silence correctly. Just air moving gently through a city that did not require her to be anything specific. Her phone was in her pocket, but for once it did not feel like an anchor. Somewhere far away, her name still existed in headlines. But here, in this quiet moment, it did not define anything at all. And for the first time since the rumors began, Tia Weston understood something simple but irreversible. The world would always have an opinion about her story, but it no longer had full control over how she survived it.